want to echo the thanks to Jim Grossman, Anthony Grafton, and the AJ staff for arranging this important session. Since Grossman and Grafton issued their statement on graduate education history some 3 months ago, I followed the ensuing conversation with great interest. Let me begin my brief reflections by noting where there appears to be agreement between Grossman and Grafton on the one hand, and Professor Lemisch on the other, as well as where they differ. Both sides in this conversation view history as a public good. I want to stress that, they view history as a public good, a set of intellectual practices that provide value to society at large and so deserve public support. Both sides are impressed by the vitality of historical research pursued by the thousands of professionally trained historians in the United States. And both sides believe that the historical profession's leading institutions, including the AHA and academic departments with doctoral programs, have a responsibility to respond to the ongoing depression in the academic job market. And it is a depression. Even after the slight rise in advertised positions this fall, the number of positions remain less than 2/3 as large as the market was prior to the onset of the global financial crisis. So much for common ground. What about contested terrain? For Grossman and Grafton, institutional responses should focus on two interconnected efforts to reshape key aspects of the profession. Firstly, doctoral granting departments should be rethinking approaches to graduate education, mentorship, and career development, so as to expand employment options for graduate students. Second, the profession should explicitly reconsider its implicit status hierarchies, especially the assumption that pride of place should go to specialized academic research undertaken by university-based historians who write primarily for other specialized university-based historians. According to Professor Lemisch, and I think I understand him correctly, this approach smacks of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It makes no sense, he maintains, to fritter away scarce institutional resources on better preparing young historians for public history careers that are just as threatened by budgetary austerity as tenure-track lines. Lemisch would prefer that the profession, led by the AHA, direct its energies toward lobbying for substantial increases in federal spending on higher education, as well as a new version of the 1930s Federal Rights Project, which would put unemployed historians and others to work on large projects of public significance. I'd just like to point out that in some respects, it seems to me this debate echoes the arguments among New Dealers about how best to respond to the Great Depression, particularly the ongoing battles over how to strike the right balance between policies that sought to furnish relief, recovery, and structural reform. Is it both and or either or? I'd be inclined to go for both and myself. I see a compelling case for expending time and effort on rethinking the way we do things in the historical profession. And in addition to considering whether doctoral programs are serving their graduate students as well as they might, we should be asking some deeper questions about exactly how history contributes to the broader society, about exactly how our discipline's practices constitute a public good. I suppose that the ethos of Zuccotti Park, a touchstone for Lemisch, might furnish one rationale for this approach. Amid the turmoil of a lengthening economic crisis, there is something to be said for concentrating on the common weal, for connecting narrower interests, such as the career prospects of young scholars, however important they may be on their own, to more general concerns. How then do professionally trained historians make a difference? And where might we make more of an impact? There are many perspectives from which to consider those questions, of course. Many academic historians would likely emphasize the influence the leading works of history have on an era's broader intellectual currents, not least by speaking truth to power, as well as the knowledge and skills that academic historians impart to their undergraduate students. Beyond these vantage points, many of us would probably venture onto the topography of public history, documentary studies, digital humanities, historical museums, the various places in which historical scholarship reaches broader audiences. These are all important contexts for us to think about, and doing so might prompt a variety of adjustments to graduate. we should also be paying attention to the potential role of historical analysis in the sense of policy dilemmas, in contextualizing policy problems and providing historical perspective on policy proposals. With regard to this last arena, historians, frankly, aren't doing nearly as much collectively as we might. Our current economic troubles, for example, are partly the result of policy amnesia, of conceits by officialdom that multinational banks have become so proficient at risk management that they can safely gamble in the financial markets with huge sums of borrowed money, or that fiscal austerity offers a plausible path out of depressed economic conditions. But how many historians in recent decades have framed their research agendas around the political economy of consumer finance, securitization, and financial deregulation, or around the macroeconomic responses to financial crises? How many historians have sought to engage with social scientists who investigate such themes, whether in academic forums or in the hurly-burly of public discourse? Perhaps more provocatively, how many historians work for the Federal Reserve or the International Monetary Fund or the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or NGOs that monitor the financial marketplace? So what's the point I'm trying to make here? The choices that historians make about what to study and which audience to reach out to, from their formative years as graduate students onwards, have implications for the sorts of public debates in which they can effectively engage, as well as the sorts of careers they might pursue, whether in academia or outside of it. So I'd like, at this point, just to quote briefly from the essay that I wrote for the December issue of Perspectives, responding to the Grossman-Grafton statement in October. The ability of historians to contribute to policy deliberations in a domain like political economy, whether from the perch of history departments, or as scholars in other academic units, or as public servants, or as employees of NGOs or unions or corporations, depends greatly on their cultivation of relevant expertise. The same goes for participation in debates about geopolitics, global health, or environmental sustainability. Historians can hardly expect to bring insights to bear on such vital questions as the apparent link between waxing inequality and financial instability if they have not closely investigated the relationship between these phenomena in some historical setting. At the same time, historians who undertake research with clear relevance for policy debates will likely enjoy some advantages should they wish to land in a policy-related position outside history departments. My point in this essay was not that all history graduate students should restrict their choice of fields and dissertation topics to ones that directly engage pressing public controversies. But we should recognize the potential that we have to expand our horizons, both intellectually and in terms of the work environments in which historians apply their trade. And seizing at least some of that potential will require some sustained re-engagement with political economy, institutional culture, and modern governance as central topics of historical examination. Like Professor Lemisch, I do not see much advantage in the historical profession choosing to hunker down in so much socioeconomic flux. I, for one, would certainly support the creation of a new federal writers project. With Professor Grafton and Dr. Grossman, however, I see an imperative to breach the channels of academic professionalization that have become so deep and narrow over the past few decades, despite the efforts of many historians to work outside their boundaries. Reorienting the profession will require some hard thinking and experimentation on many fronts, reconsidering the structure of graduate education to be sure, but also reimagining the basic functions of the AHA, encouraging collaborations amongst academic historians and between historians and scholars from other disciplines, and I would stress the social sciences as well as the humanities. Building professional networks that extend beyond academia, exploring new techniques for communicating historical arguments and engaging in historical debates. Maybe even revising the definition of what counts as research for the purposes of tenure determinations at leading history departments. My intuition is that creativity on all of these fronts will enable historians to demonstrate their value more sharply and to get across more effectively the ways in which professional historical practice indeed represents a public good. Such creativity, I suspect, can elicit greater demand for historical expertise both outside and within academia, They can also help build coalitions that would support more public investment.